We just hit 50,000 subscribers, and that means it is time for another giveaway to thank you all for your support of the channel, because without you, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing here, getting a lot of this cool gear from various companies and making my first feature film now with a lot of that gear. And so I have teamed up with Zhiyun to give away this brand new Cinepeer Weevil 3 Echo or 3E gimbal. Camera's not included, we're talking about the gimbal here. This thing was just released and this will really up your filmmaking game. So before we get into what you can expect from this gimbal, let's talk about rules. Entries start today, as in the posting of this video, and go through July 1st at 11:59 p.m. Then I will be picking a winner for this gimbal and announcing it in a live video on July 4th. Good old Independence Day for the USA. In order to enter, there are 3 steps that you're going to have to do, and they're going to be placed throughout the video, so you need to pay attention and make sure you follow those steps, because if you don't, you won't be able to enter. Number 1 is to simply hit that like button. Go down right now before we get started, hit that like button, and that is the first step to get entered to win this new Cinepeer Weevil 3E gimbal. Now when it comes to gimbals, there are 5 basic modes that you get when using these, and we're going to cover all those. So once you get your camera balanced on it, which that's another thing I really like about these, so you have the locking mechanism, you can take it off really quickly, camera's off, right? And I want to transport this thing, I can lock every axis on here, and now I can easily strap this to my camera bag, put it in it or strap it to the bottom. I've done before when traveling, and it's easy to take along with you, whereas like this very first gimbal I got here, it's pretty big, bulky, and you could get some zip ties or something to hold this shut, but it's still gonna spin around all the time. So it wasn't very good for transporting. You couldn't lock all the axes like you can with this one, and that makes it really easy for when you're balancing it as well, because I can bring this out, lock it, bring this down, lock it, get the camera back on. Right there was my balance spot, and I'm gonna re-lock that in place. And now we're all set. So if you want to set it down when filming, you can lock every axis, and now you can just leave your camera on it there. With the various modes, the first thing you have is the pan follow mode, and you have a nice little LED screen here that tells you all those modes. So starting with the pan follow mode, you have PF on the screen. The tilt axis and the roll axis motors are locked, and the camera rotates with the handle just panning. So I turn left, the camera's gonna follow me, I turn right. And this is what I use most of the time, because if I'm following someone or moving backwards, and as you turn, you can follow them easily, but I don't want any vertical movements. I can fine tune that with the joystick if I want, but pretty much all I'm doing is left and right panning. And that brings us to the second mode, L or lock mode. So every axis is locked, the roll, the tilt, the pan, and so you can move the gimbal all around, the camera stays in place around the gimbal. And the times I like to use something like this is if I'm trying to use it like a slider or dolly type of shot. I can be in close, and we actually did this quite a few times in the film that we're making right now, and just start moving backwards slowly, keeping that straight line. Because if you try to do that in the pan mode, if you're moving back, if you tilt your hand at all, the camera's gonna start turning. So being able to move back slowly, if you're doing that good ninja walk, or in one of the cases we were in a pool, so it's almost like kind of just float back slowly. Even if you're sitting in a chair, you could just be holding it and someone moving you backwards, and you get the same effect. And then we have F for follow mode, and this is where the roll axis is still locked, so you won't get anything this way, but then you have the vertical or tilt axis along with the pan. So this is useful if you're wanting to look down over something or start to look up at something without having to use the joystick. You know you're gonna do that with the shot, and you want it to be more smooth than trying to use the joystick. Then you can start moving, and the camera is going to slowly follow you. And you can go in to the motors and really fine tune how quickly it does these various movements in the pan axis, in the tilt axis, and really get it dialed in for whatever scene you're trying to accomplish. Like one of the ones we use this mode for in the movie we're filming is a scene waking up where we have the camera directly overhead, and then as the character wakes up and starts to sit up, we move back and down like this, so the camera is following nicely and keeping everything in view, rather than trying to manipulate with a joystick or just holding a camera and it being all shaky. And then we have the point of view mode, and with this, every axis is working. So you have the pan left and right that we talked about, the tilt up and down, but also now we have the roll involved. So this could be something that's really useful. Things that come to mind for me is like a fight type of scene, like maybe someone's getting knocked out and you're trying to move it around and disorient the audience a little bit to get the feel of what's going on. Or say you want to do a Dutch angle built into a shot where you're moving, you can start to slowly roll it and get that angle in there. You could get really creative with this. It's not something that I've used much at all except for experimenting with, but I definitely see where that could come in handy depending on the type of scene that you're wanting to get and the mood that you want to convey to your audience. And then we have the vortex mode. So this is where the camera turns directly up, and then you can hold the camera forward or you keep it up depending on how you want, and use the joystick and have the camera do a complete 360-degree roll. And I've been seeing this more and more in all kinds of movies, and it's not something that I would do just for the fun of it. You definitely want to have a reason to motivate various movements. But off the top of my head, in the first Black Panther, when Killmonger is taking over as King of Wakanda, as he's entering the throne room, the camera's upside down and we get this whole turning motion slowly as he's walking towards the throne. It turns to sit down. Everything just got turned upside down, so everything's twisting from how it's supposed to be, and now there's a whole new regime and everything's changed. So it can be a useful tool in something like that. It's not something you see often, so again, make sure you have a reason to use it. But it is a neat mode to have and be able to do that with this gimbal. I even was able to do it steadily with my FX3 on here and a 24-70 f2.8 lens. So that's a pretty big load there on the gimbal. If you saw my review of the Weebill 3S, well, this one is slightly smaller than this 3S gimbal and slightly lighter, but it still gives you the same payload. And so that brings us to step number 2. Let me know what kind of camera and lens you're using down in the comments so we can see if it would be compatible with this gimbal, as well as what type of videos you think you'd be shooting if you got this. But based on my experience, it can handle a large payload and deliver good results. There are options in here to fine tune the motors, so I get it balanced the best I could, and then I go in and hit auto tune, and then it balanced all the motors, and then it worked really well on there. Otherwise, you might get a little bit jittery motion. If you don't do that, if you're using something like this, a prime lens, it's a lot lighter, it'll be able to handle it better. But when you're near that max payload, auto tuning the motors is definitely something you'll want to do to get the best performance. And I would still do it even with the lens like this, because why not get the best performance regardless of the situation you're in? Some of the other features that come along with this is Bluetooth capability. So I'm able to hook this up to my camera through Bluetooth, and then I can use this recording button to start recording on my camera without having to reach up and be pushing the camera while it's on the gimbal and stressing the motors more. So that's definitely a bonus there. There's other things you can do through that, but for me, that's the main thing I use Bluetooth for when operating the gimbal. Now, we talked about all those main modes for filming, but something else this has is the portrait mode. And rather than taking the camera with its plate off of the mount, you can take the entire mount off and then you turn it 90 degrees and put it back on to the gimbal, and now you're set up to do portrait mode. So you can use your gimbal with your nice camera to get those vertical videos for your YouTube Shorts, TikToks, Instagram Reels, and get it with a lot higher quality footage with a nice camera rather than just using your cell phone. But it's also customizable buttons and dials you have on this, from the trigger on the front to the roll wheel here, to help you quickly get to various modes that you may be using more often with your gimbal. There's also app control, which is really cool with these things. So not only can you hook this up to the gimbal and then go in there and remotely control it, say you just want to move the gimbal around with it, but you can also sync your phone to the gimbal. So as you turn up or down, left or right, the gimbal is going to follow the movement of your phone. Now that can be kind of touchy and hard to get used to, but it is a cool feature. But something I used it mostly for is doing time lapses. I could go in and program a time lapse ahead of time. So here's my start point with the gimbal, here's my end point, and I like to do long exposure time lapses. So then I was able to set it up for how long each picture was going to take, like a 5-second exposure, and then it would take that and then move slightly, take the next one, move slightly, and did that over a period of like 20 minutes, and then I got a pretty cool time lapse of St. Mark's Square in Venice. It has a long runtime. I haven't tested it out, but their literature says 16 hours. When I took this one to Italy, I would charge it up and carry it around using it the whole weekend in Venice, and I never recharged it. The thing was just fine. I never ran out of battery. And you probably won't be using it for a really long time, because even though it is small and light, once your camera and everything's on there, it does get heavy while you're using it. So you're probably going to be using it in spurts. And if you're using it for a film shoot like we were, you know, you do a take, you set it down, you're checking the footage, do another take, and it's not usually more than like 1 to 2 minutes you're holding it at a time. And those are the features that you can expect with this new Cinepeer Weevil 3E gimbal. You can get really good footage with this thing. And so the third step in order to get entered is to go to my Instagram at Camber Films. I'll have a link in the description as well for you to do that, and leave a comment under the post that has the same thumbnail as this video with your YouTube username. But I'll have a bonus fourth tip for you here in just a second. Now, obviously, gimbals are expensive. Not everyone can afford them. It is a great device, and I have links for it in the description so you can check out if you don't happen to be the lucky winner of this specific gimbal that I'll be sending out. But there are lots of cool things you can do with your standard equipment. I have videos on tripod tricks and monopod tricks where you can mimic a whole lot of movements. In my tripod video, you have gimbal type moves you can do with your tripod, slider moves, dolly moves, and the same with monopods. We're mimicking sliders, dollies, gimbals, all kinds of options that you can do. You just have to get creative. You got to get really good at it. You have to practice to make it look real with mimicking those things. But with enough practice, you can actually do a lot with a small amount of gear. So don't think you have to get a gimbal. I mean, don't get me wrong. These make it a lot easier to do those moves because it is a gimbal. And there's a lot of moves that we did, like with the film. I don't know if we'd be able to do it without a gimbal. All that to say, there is a whole lot you can do with the equipment you have. Get creative. Be sure to check out those other videos. I'll have them linked down below to help you improve your filmmaking. And I have a lot of other videos as well showing you things like the rule of thirds, all kinds of framing and lighting techniques. Because you can get a gimbal, but just because you have the gimbal doesn't mean your footage is going to be good. You need to master those things like framing and lighting, blocking, how you need to do all those various aspects of filming and get to where that's second nature. So then when you do throw in a gimbal, well, all of a sudden it just makes it that much better. And so for the bonus number 4 step, go ahead and subscribe. We'll get this up to 100,000 subscribers and give out a really nice camera, maybe like an FX3 or something like that. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and good luck to everyone who's entering to win this Zhiyun Cinepeer Weevil 3 Echo. But if you have any questions about it, post them down below. Can talk to you guys there. Good luck to everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.